presentation is basically going to be focusing on a 2-year project that we did called Get Growing, and I think it's going to echo a lot of the things that Michael has just been talking about. And we've kind of based the Get Growing project on some of the successes that Michael's group has been working on with some of the NAN communities. So the next slide, please. So the Get Growing project, we received funding from the Ministry of Health Promotion and Sport. It was a 2-year project that ended March 2013, and we had 5 communities who participated: Wawakapewin, Sandy Lake, Wapakika, Fort Albany, and Kiwewin. Next slide. Okay. So this map isn't very clear, but it gives you a general sense of where the communities are located. So we're looking at the coastal communities and northwest and kind of central there. So they are all remote fly-in communities. Okay. So our overall goal when we applied for the funding was to address the critical issues of diabetes, obesity, and chronic disease through healthy eating and active living. And again, we were building on the work that the Indigenous Health Research Group had been doing with some of the NAN communities. Okay, next slide. So some of our objectives under that project were to increase access to fresh, locally grown foods, increase knowledge, skills on growing foods, harvesting, preserving, and cooking. Supporting community connections was a very strong component, and encouraging celebration of food and community and bringing people together. So next slide. So there's some pictures of some of the harvest. I know when we had started the Get Growing project, there was some discussion about growing food in the north. We know we had comments that the season wasn't long enough, there was no topsoil, the animals would destroy it. But as you can see from the pictures, that the communities have been able to produce beautiful gardens and have quite large harvests come out of those gardens. Okay, so next picture. Each community was pretty unique in how they decided they wanted to participate in the 2-year project. So there was a variety of different initiatives and activities that went on. This picture is just showing that some of the land-based activities were very much around intergenerational knowledge and skills and involving youth. Okay. Next picture. And again, there's just another picture of some of the wonderful gardens that were developed throughout the course of this project. So with the Get Growing project, we did have an application process because we had 49 First Nations, and we were trying to make sure that we had a process that was fair and equitable to everyone. Luckily, we only had 5 communities apply at the time, so we really didn't have to screen anyone out, which was wonderful. We identified part of the application process. There had to be an identification of a community champion that would lead the project. There also had to be some kind of organization at the community level around an advisory group, whether that was informal or formal, whether it was 3 people or 10 people. It didn't matter as long as there was some support around the community champion to ensure the sustainability of the project. And then we also requested that there was some chief and council support, either through a band council resolution or a letter supporting the project at the community level. Okay, next slide. So the Get Going project was very much community-led. The communities determined what their projects were going to look like, what initiatives that they were going to work on. We know and realize that communities know what they need and how to do it, and it's just the lack of resources that becomes a barrier to moving forward. Communities took a bunch of different approaches and worked with a variety of people at the community level. So some were a focus on backyard gardens, some were focusing on school gardens, greenhouses, land-based activities. Some were looking at alternative food systems such as good food boxes or markets. And our role at NAN was basically to create a supportive environment that would strengthen the community action, provide information and education as requested, and provide some of the resources that communities had a really difficult time in trying to access, such as garden equipment, heritage seeds, and things like that. Okay. So as part of the evaluation of this project, we developed a questionnaire in the second year with the assistance of the First Nations Statistical Institute and our Food Sovereignty Advisory Group members. which was formed in the second year of Get Growing also, and those members were part of some of the participating communities. At the same time, we were also developing a food assessment. We realized that we really need some baseline data so that we can measure the success of these programs. That tool has been developed, but we're still looking for a partner to help with the research aspect of it and to find a way to collect the data and do a good analysis of that data. So the biggest part of our evaluation was really community visits, sharing stories, visiting the gardens, having conversations. We have lots of pictures from communities of their initiatives. And like Michael said, the phone interviews and talking with people over the phone was very effective. The evaluation that we developed in terms of the questionnaire was really just a short page, 4-page evaluation that asked some key specific questions. I mean, it was good to get some information, but I think it was very limited, and actual conversations with the communities was, we were able to gain a lot more information that way. And also as part of the evaluation process was having that relationship and trust at the community level to be able to do that. One of the other tools that we kind of used in a couple of the communities was PHAC, Planning Alternative Tomorrows with Hope, which is, I'm not sure how many people are aware of it, but it's a community planning tool or an individual tool that you could use to kind of get a sense of where, it starts kind of with the dream and then it moves backward to doing specific action items, and it identifies your community assets, your strengths, who are your community champions, how do you enroll them, and kind of what your plan looks like. And it can be revisited, at either 3 months, 6 months, or, at the end of a year to see, where are you on your plan. It's a very visual plan. Everything is done in pictures and words, and so it does, what we found is that it does capture people's imagination and get them excited and mobilized about moving forward on different projects. There's just a kind of a sample of what our questionnaire looked like. Basically, it was just very much tick boxes. We know the communities are overburdened with reporting. We wanted to make something very simple. The Food Sovereignty Advisory Group members who are from the communities had input into the tool to make sure that it was relevant. And so, as I said, it's just a 4-page kind of document, and I'm willing to share that, and people can modify it or however they see fit. Okay. So at the end of the project, what we found is that the project helped to facilitate people coming together for a common purpose and desire, and that it was a kind of a catalyst for change because people started talking about being food secure. What did that really mean at the community level? What did it mean to them as an individual? And one community decided to ban energy drinks. There's been an inclusion of a food file at Chief and Council in one of the communities. There's a great sense of pride and accomplishment at the community levels when they're looking at being able to produce their own food and share that with other community members. We've had lots of requests, of course, from communities wanting, NAN to support them in similar ways, but the funding was, it wasn't a big chunk of funding, and out of 49, we were only able to support 5 communities. What we found, too, is that the communities are starting to network and share information and skills. Communities are inviting some of the Get Growing projects to come to their community to share their knowledge and skills around gardening, around canning, around preserving food. One community has really done an amazing job on preserving wild meats and things that have been grown from her garden. She's got moose meat and tomato sauce, and it's just been amazing. And so where that has kind of moved now is looking at, is that marketable? Is there some economic development that could be established out of that work? And then during that year, too, our Food Sovereignty Advisory Group was established. And they've been invited to speak at various events, such as Bringing Food Home, Food Secure Canada. They're always presenting at our NAN Food Symposium. There was also a video called Get Growing that was developed by Sustain Ontario, and I think if you Google Sustain, it should be on their website. But it's a really good short documentary about the community, talking about their experience through the 2-year project. So one of the other things we had learned about was that it's all around community mobilization, and what is it that community members are very passionate about and would like to take action on, and that is always determined at the community level. And so it seemed that the whole idea around local food production, land-based activities, has really kind of snowballed, and we've in this last week we've had 5 communities call and say, assist us, let's get on board with moving forward on this. We found that the children really participated in the gardens, and some of the stories related to the children were that they felt it was a safe place to be. Some communities established root cellars and were able to put away food for 3 to 4 months at a time. And some of the communities were exploring some alternatives to accessing nutritious foods, such as good food boxes and different markets. A lot of stories about the elders, and the elders remembering when they used to garden in the communities, and they knew where the gardens used to be located. And they were helping some of the community members to reestablish those gardens in the key locations. And looking at the community's strengths and assets and utilizing resources within the community and not always relying on everything having to come from the outside. So, one community had designed a smoker from an old fridge. They built greenhouses over leftover lumber and garden boxes. Elders have shared knowledge about using fish and other things in the community as fertilizer. One community was able to leverage some extra dollars through the Get Growing with the Band Council to build a learning barn, which they're looking at adding chickens to this year. So some of the lessons learned were that it has to be community-led, it has to be community-focused, that you need to find the community champions and support them as much as possible, because they're the ones that kind of lead the way and get people excited and on board. That people need to be connected. We've heard from our communities for a while that please find ways for us to network because of the isolation and the distance between communities. It's very hard to be able to do that. So that's one of the reasons why our food symposium, which we'll be hosting again in August, it'll be the 5th one, is so key, because it allows an opportunity for community members to come together and share their stories and talk about gardening and talk about the activities that they're doing at the community level. We also realize that the communities have many, many assets, both in people and resources, and throughout the life of this project, we've seen many creative initiatives and projects that took place that were kind of even outside of the scope of this project. And that there is a desire to learn more about other initiatives across the country, not just within NAN. There's been some talk of trying to host a national Indigenous gathering around food. That one of the big things, of course, was the funding, that we didn't get the funding until August of that year, so we missed a whole growing season. So, the need to have very responsive funding so that we can support communities where and when they need that support is very key, and it's one of the things that we're currently doing now, is looking at building a collaborative fund so that when communities are ready to go, they're excited that the funding is there to get them going and provide the resources that they need. Okay. And one of the other lessons we learned, and was talked about at the community level, was the need to celebrate, and that historically communities' life was centered around food. There's many teachings and ceremonies that are related to food, the connection to the land and to the people, and we're hearing that people want to bring that back and to celebrate those at the community level. So some of our challenges were the expectation really of the funder doesn't always align with what the community feels is important information to be gathering, and I think Michael touched a bit on that. And the remoteness factor and the high cost of bringing people together and being able to ship out resources or for the communities to even access that. I mean, there is the use of the winter road. This year was a good year for it. You know, the lakes froze early, and they're probably not going to start melting till in a few weeks. But in years past, that window's been very narrow, and we've looked at from January to March for 2 months, and that's where the communities really rely on bringing in a lot of their resources. Of course, there was the increased demand from other communities that we couldn't meet. In one community, when the community champion left, the program really stalled, and there really was no one else to kind of pick it up. You know, so it'd be interesting to kind of explore how do we support that? How do we, you know, so it's not just on one person's shoulders, but that there's a kind of a community collaborative around food security. And then again, the funding that wasn't received until year end. Okay. So currently, you know, the project ended in March 2013, but 4 communities have continued on. They're expanding their gardens. They're exploring using hoop houses, simple greenhouses, looking at saving seeds. The one community with the barn that I had mentioned earlier is really excited about, you know, trying to raise some livestock and use it as a learning barn for school-age children. There's a big movement in alternative markets. We have a project now called Healthy Food Initiatives, where we're looking at, you know, things like good food boxes or alternative markets and what that would look like at the community level. We have a NAN 5-year food strategy that's very comprehensive. We have a food symposium that's held each year. This year we're holding it at the end of August, and we're actually going to host it in Nishnawbe Cree territory on the land, so we're very excited about that. And one of the ways we support our community champions is through a recognition award at the food symposium. One of the ways that we're going to be looking at connecting people, and maybe it's going to be an opportunity to maybe look at more of the evaluation pieces, launching a NAN web portal, should be launched by the end of April, where communities can share stories, pictures, recipes. We're going to look at a trade section where people could put things that they want to trade back and forth. And then the one thing that we want to address from the issue with the responsive funding is the collaborative funding table. So we have a lot of partners sitting at that table right now, federal, provincial governments, nonprofit, private sectors. We'll have our 3rd meeting coming up, and just looking at exploring options of, you know, how do we work together, how do we leverage each other's funding, you know, how do we share resources versus an organization like NAN having to submit 16 different applications. That's very labor intensive and doesn't really meet the needs of the community at the time that it's needed. And so the last slide is just a few pictures of some of the activities that had taken place through Get Growing. A lot of land-based. The moose meat sausage hanging there is from the smoker that was made from an old fridge that was found at the dump. So people being creative. And next slide. Okay. So that's it. Thank you very much.